Harold Frederick Shipman, or Fred, had always had a contentious relationship with his mother. She was often controlling and domineering, but now she was fragile. Her terminal lung cancer was leaving her in constant pain. Fred had volunteered to care for her at the ripe young age of 17. He watched as the morphine slid down the tube, under her physician's supervision, blurring the line between pain and bliss, life and death, and an inclination began in young Fred. He decided he would be a doctor, but was it to help people be well and comfortable, or to hold the power of death in his hands? It would seem that Fred was devastated by his mother's death. He decided to go to medical school, and in 1970, he graduated from Leeds University. Later, he would settle in Todmorden, Lancashire, where he practiced general medicine. His career in medicine was successful. Fred was the most popular physician. Patients would often ask to wait longer for their appointments just to see Fred. Fred cared. He wanted to know how the kids were, if you had eaten that day, or if you had plans later in the week.
If you were to ask any patient of Harold Shipman, who I've known for some 20 years as my GP, they would only see him like I see him, as an extremely hard-working and caring GP.
But was that the real Fred? His colleagues tell a different story, describing him as a narcissist and a bully. Fred always thought he knew best, and if there was one thing that he hated most, it was a challenge to his authority. Then, the other shoe dropped. In 1975, it was discovered that Fred had been writing prescriptions for a cocaine-based drug for himself. He was fined and promptly entered drug rehab. It would later be discovered that in addition to the drugs, Fred had committed his first 2 murders. This is where Fred should have been barred from practice. But 2 years later, he would have a new practice in a new city. Fred again gained hundreds of adoring patients who boosted his ego, making him feel admired. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more fame and special attention. Fred spoke on television about the state of the mentally ill in the community, gave to charitable causes, and dragged his religious wife and 4 children to events around town, garnering respect and approval. Nobody suspected Sweet Fred. Not until the local undertaker noticed that Dr. Shipman's patients appeared to be passing away at an exceptionally high rate. The worried undertaker approached Fred about it immediately, but Fred told him that there really was nothing to worry about. Later, Dr. Susan Booth, a different medical colleague, expressed her concern about the similarities, which prompted the local coroner's office to notify the authorities. A formal investigation was launched, which may seem to be the end of Fred, but he was cleared, since it seemed that his records about his dead patients were accurate. Fred's tracks were covered. Other trusted doctors had signed off on the death certificates based on Fred's reputation, and Fred's patients had a high incidence of cremation, leaving little evidence. It was nearly impossible to determine when Fred started killing his patients, or even how many perished at his hands, because he was hiding behind his reputation as a kind, reputable family doctor. His denial of all charges did little to help the authorities. Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old woman, a patient of Fred, was found dead at her own home only hours after he had visited her. The patient's family was shocked by her sudden death because she appeared to be in good condition. What is even more shocking is that the will of the patient had been altered to Fred's advantage, and left him the entire wealth and estate, which was estimated to be worth nearly £400,000. And the fact that Fred insisted that no autopsy was necessary. Kathleen's daughter, Angela, was pretty suspicious at this statement. Angela had helped her mother run her business for years and was a lawyer. When she heard of the will, she was immediately sure that Fred had killed her mother and forged her will in order to profit from her death. Angela notified the authorities, and after Detective Superintendent Bernard Postles reviewed the available evidence, he reached the same conclusion.
Dr. Harold Shipman was brought to Tameside Magistrates Court to face charges of murdering an elderly patient and forging her will.
Kathleen's body was exhumed, and a post-mortem revealed that she had overdosed on morphine within 3 hours of passing away. A search of Fred's house turned up medical documents, an unusual assortment of jewelry, and an antique typewriter that turned out to be the machine used to create the forged will. From the medical records seized, it was immediately clear to the police that the case would involve more than just one death.
A family doctor from Manchester, who was charged last month with murdering one of his patients and forging her will, has appeared in court accused of killing 3 more women.
The Greater Manchester GP, Dr. Harold Shipman, has been charged with another 7 murders. Dr. Shipman is already accused of killing 8 patients, and he'll face one of the largest murder trials in British history.
Guilty of murdering 15 of his patients, Harold Shipman is sentenced to life.
On the 31st of January 2000, Fred was found guilty of the murders and was sentenced to death. On the 13th of January 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, Fred committed suicide while in prison, hanging himself in his cell. It can be disturbing to learn about Shipman's story, in which the doctors we put our trust in to take care of our health have evil intentions. Fred Shipman murdered an average of 8 patients a year over his career, largely unnoticed, an unsettling fact. What do you think about Fred's story? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and check out the channel. Thank you for tuning in, and see you again soon. Take care.